It is a prime time to be a fan of Detroit sports. We look at baseball. We have the Detroit Tigers. Now, I'm not much of a baseball guy myself, but I hear the Tigers are currently one of the best teams in all of the MLB. We look at the NFL. We have the Detroit Lions, who just last year, they just lost just one game. Coming into this year, they're going to have one of the hardest schedules in all of the NFL, which means they're going to be involved in a lot of high-profile, highly competitive NFL games. That's going to be very exciting. And last but certainly not least, we have the Detroit Pistons, who in my opinion, their season that just concluded, this season was so goddamn phenomenal, because we look at where these guys were just at 1 year ago. These guys were on the wrong side of NBA history, winning just 14 games and losing the most consecutive games in the NBA history. And what I love about the situation is that the Detroit Pistons, they looked at all the young talent on this team and they could have easily broke it up. They could have easily said everybody that's not named Cade Cunningham, these guys are expendable. But instead, they believed in this young talent and they decided to revamp the organization in other ways, starting in the front office with a new front office hire with bringing in Trajan Langdon from the New Orleans Pelicans, and then he decided to name JB Bickerstaff as the new head coach of the Detroit Pistons. And then they started to work together and they brought in some much needed veteran help, bringing in Tobias Harris, bringing in Malik Beasley, bringing in Tim Hardaway Jr., and then deciding to draft Ron Holland with the 5th overall pick. All of these things that transpired in the summer for the Detroit Pistons, it benefited these guys so much, because like we said, just a year ago on the wrong side of NBA history, just one NBA season later, 1 year later, the Detroit Pistons, they instantly get right back on the right side of NBA history, becoming the first team ever to triple their win total from the previous season. Last year, just 14 wins on the season that just concluded for these guys, they get 44 wins, and these 44 wins was good enough to get the Detroit Pistons into the playoffs. Another thing that was just so phenomenal for this organization, because me personally, I saw all the moves that they was making and I was loving the moves, and I thought they were going to be a better team. They were going to be competitive, but I had the Detroit Pistons getting into the play-in tournament. And as this season started to unfold, they had a very tough schedule to begin the year, and they were racking up a bunch of L's to begin this season. And that's just another thing that is so impressive, because resiliency has been the theme for the Detroit Pistons this season, because I feel like with the way that last year went and you come into this year, it's a lot of pressure. At the time, you don't have the fans on your side, and to start the season off losing, that could have been really bad for morale, and it could have gotten low for the Detroit Pistons, but it never did. And by the time we got to the month of January, these guys kept developing, they kept growing, and they got confident. Once they got confident and they believed how great they were, and not to say that these guys never were confident, but nonetheless, we get to the month of January, the Detroit Pistons, they became one of the best teams in all of the NBA. That's according to their record. I'm not making this up. They had one of the best records in all of the NBA in the month of January to the end of the season. And also from the month of January to the end of the season, the Detroit Pistons were their number one defensive rated team. So they were playing great basketball. And when we got to the NBA playoffs, I know I said I didn't expect the Detroit Pistons to get to the playoffs this season, but as I watched them as the season went on, I saw how good that this team was. And when we found out that we were going to play the Knicks, I got excited, because I thought that the Detroit Pistons, they had a chance to win this series. And after watching this series unfold, I don't think that's something that was ever not true, especially when we look at the Detroit Pistons not having Jaden Ivey, not having Isaiah Stewart after game one, and then also just a bunch of self-inflicted wounds that came from being an inexperienced playoff team. So all in all, like I said, I think this was a phenomenal season for the Detroit Pistons. They did so much good this year. We saw so much individual growth from a lot of players, and then we just saw so many special things from these guys as a unit, as a group. And what the Detroit Pistons were able to do with a phenomenal season like this, they just accelerated their rebuilding process. And I know that they've been rebuilding for a long time, but they were stuck in that same spot for so long. We never seen them become competitive. Usually we see teams, they show a little bit of signs of becoming competitive. They get really close to the playoffs, but they don't end up making it. And then it's that next season where they figure it out. But this season, we saw the Detroit Pistons. We saw them slowly become competitive. And then after that, in the same season, they became a playoff team. So with the Detroit Pistons accelerating their timeline like this, it's going to make the next couple of off seasons very interesting, because there's so many directions that they can go in now, because now they know that they have a superstar in Cade Cunningham. And now once you know that you have a superstar, now you know that once you know that you have a superstar, you know that as long as you have that player and you have the right guys around him, at bare minimum, you're going to be able to get into the NBA playoffs. So there's been a lot of noise about the Detroit Pistons going out and getting trades for superstar players. I've been hearing Giannis, I've been hearing Kevin Durant, I've been hearing Devin Booker, and you pair any of those guys with Cade Cunningham. I'm not too high on Kevin Durant. I think he's a little bit too old. I wouldn't want KD, but if you compare somebody like Giannis with Giannis or Devin Booker with Cade Cunningham, of course I would love that. But the one thing I would not love, if the Detroit Pistons have to give up the farm for it, because I'm not really a fan of giving up the farm, and that just hasn't been a trend that has worked the last couple of years. In NBA history, we look at the last few teams that have won championships. They've been very deep. They've been very deep teams with a bunch of great role players. Starting back with 2019, we look at the Toronto Raptors. They had Kawhi Leonard, and then they had a bunch of really good players. Pascal Siakam. He wasn't an all-star at the time. He was a really good role player. They had Marc Gasol. They had Norman Powell, Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet. All of these really good role players. Serge Ibaka. Look at 2020. Yes, the Los Angeles Lakers had Anthony Davis and LeBron James, but they had so many great role players. KCP, Kyle Kuzma, Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, Rajon Rondo. It goes on and on. 2021 Bucks, they have Giannis, and then they have a bunch of really good players. Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, PJ Tucker. So you guys see what I'm saying. The recipe for winning championships right now is not having 2 superstar players and then whoever you can get to fill in because you don't have enough money to go out and get more players, but it's finding those guys, finding those role players that fit around your stars, fit around your 2 best players. So I would prefer for the Detroit Pistons. Of course, I would love if they can land a star like a Devin Booker, but I wouldn't want to give up a bunch of first round picks and then also have to give up somebody like a Jalen Duren, or give up like a Jaden Ivey, or give up like an Asar Thompson. I don't think the Detroit Pistons should do that, because I want to look at this previous offseason, and this previous offseason, I think it speaks a lot of volumes, because we look at the guys that they added, and I'm not trying to diminish these guys in any way, because what they did this season, it was unexpected. Like, I knew they were going to help, but to the degree that they did, it's still kind of mind-blowing right now. But these guys that were brought in, Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., these aren't guys that were, getting their door broken down to try to get for teams to try to get them to come and play for them. Like Malik Beasley, this is his fifth NBA team. Tim Hardaway Jr., he's in the later stages of his NBA career. Tobias Harris, a really good ball player, but he wasn't receiving a bunch of calls. There weren't like a bidding war going on for Tobias Harris. My point being is that, as good as those guys were, I think that speaks to how good the young talent is on the Detroit Pistons, because, the few years that we've been struggling is because we've been devoid of the good role players. We've been devoid of that veteran talent. So I would love the Detroit Pistons to keep going in that direction. I'm not saying that they can go out and make trades, but I would rather it be for, those very high quality role players, those plug in and play players that won't mess up the synergy of the team. Like with the Denver Nuggets going out and getting a player like Aaron Gordon, like that trade right there is so big time. It made Nikola Jokic a much better player. We look at the Golden State Warriors in 2022. going out and getting an Andrew Wiggins. We look at the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics, they did it so goddamn good. They have their two players no matter what. It's going to be Jaylen Brown and it's going to be Jaylen Brown. It's going to be Jason Tatum. It's never going to be a third crazy superstar. They're going to put some really good role players around these guys, and the way that they did it, getting Derek White, getting Drew Holiday, getting Kristaps Porzingis, and they're not going to be able to afford those guys for that long, but they got a goddamn championship out of it, and they might get another one this season. So all of that, all of that trading and going out and getting a star is cool until you don't have, the adequate role players, because the NBA, all these teams in the playoffs, we look at the 8 teams we have left, these guys have a bunch of depth on their roster, or a bunch of really good players. So that's the direction I want the Pistons to continue to go in. Because what happens when we get a Devin Booker and we get a Giannis and we give up all of these assets and somebody gets injured? So you just never know. So I'm all for it. I love the young core. Jaden Ivey, before he went down, I know a lot of people saying it should be easy for the Detroit Pistons to trade him. I don't think so. He's still super young. Ain't no telling what his ceiling is right now. He was having the best season of his NBA career, and what was so beautiful about it is that he also, just like the Pistons, he got off to a slow start to the season himself. But, he had a couple of weeks where he was playing tremendous basketball. And by the time he got injured, all of his numbers for the season, they were career highs and everything. Career highs in points, career highs from efficiency. So I'm not so ready to give up on Jaden Ivey just yet. But that's just how I feel. You guys let me know how you feel down in the comment section below. And then leave a like and subscribe. Subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man. And that's curtains.